Welcome, everybody, to the Jim Acosta Show. It is another day that ends in Y if we were talking about Trump's cover-up and the Epstein Gate scandal. Today, my big guest is Senator Ruben Gallego of Arizona. Senator, great to see you.
Good to see you too.
Hey, and I should just start off by saying today's efforts to cover up the truth in Epstein Gate are centered in Florida. That's where Justice Department officials are scheduled to meet with Jeffrey Epstein's ex-girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, who's serving a 20-year prison sentence for child sex trafficking. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist, Senator, to figure out that Maxwell could be offered some kind of deal to exonerate Trump in exchange for her release or a lighter sentence. What do you make of all this? What's been your sense of this whole thing since it blew up a couple of weeks ago?
I mean, it's just shady. It's just really shady, and it reeks of a cover-up. And, Republicans are like, oh, why don't you guys bring this up? Like, we never made this a campaign issue. Trump and his people made this a campaign issue for 8 years. And then they get into office, and they continued making it a campaign issue. And then it blew up in their face. And then they're surprised that we're all like, okay, so why did it just blow up in your face? Were you lying the whole time and you were taking advantage of, essentially re-victimizing these women, or girls, I should say? Were you trying to exploit, the vulnerabilities of a lot of your voting base by claiming that everyone's pedophiles, right? You claimed the DOJ was not actually going after these guys, and now you're using the DOJ to cover up for these elites. So, the reason is just so interesting this way. There's people that are still asking questions is because it smells bad. It looks bad. And like at the core, Americans know and feel when there is a cover up, especially of some really rich people.
Yeah, I mean, and the other issue in all of this, I mean, this was the bombshell that came out in the Wall Street Journal yesterday afternoon that exposed that Trump's name does in fact appear multiple times in the Epstein files. I mean, I guess the big question is will he ever release the Epstein files? We don't know the answer to that question yet. And what do these files say about Trump? And I guess at this point, you guys are just as much in the dark as everybody else.
Sure.
We just don't know. They're holding the keys to the closet, I guess, or to the
Right, but
the
this
office
is
that holds
just
it.
rank hypocrisy. Yeah. I mean, if you think about, these are the guys that went after Hillary Clinton for, improper email servers, right? These are the people that have been claiming of all these conspiracy theories and have been asking and demanding for investigations when in fact, we know for a fact, and if you see how Donald Trump just acts when it comes to this issue, that there's something there.
Yeah.
And, today I went to the floor and tried to, again, get the Epstein files released. And of course, again, I was blocked by a Republican senator. And the best thing you could do, especially when you're dealing with a lot of people that are wondering if there's conspiracy theory, is to release all the information so people can actually figure out what is happening there. This is the campaign they talked about fighting for regular people, fighting against the elites. And they talk about trying to protect children. They tie this also into border security. And now, for someone that we know for a fact was dealing and conducting themselves with child exploitation when it comes to Epstein, they're covering up for him, and they're covering up for a lot of people, not just Donald Trump.
Yeah, and I was going to mention you did introduce a resolution calling for the release of the Epstein files, and so you tried to make that happen again today, and you were blocked. Are your colleagues on the other side of the aisle, are they saying anything to you, privately, like, "Ooh, this doesn't look good," or "This is bad," or I mean, what's going on?
Well, I mean, I think they're just trying to hope the issue goes away. Look, on the House side, the House of Representatives literally fled Washington, D.C. This is the quickest that the House of Representatives has ever left Washington, D.C. since the War of 1812, right? And, they cannot get themselves in a position to solve well, they can. The problem is there's some Republicans who are joining with Democrats to actually, get more information or trying to force a vote. But they're more worried about trying to cover up for the president and his elite friends than trying to get to the truth. And none of this was ever necessary, Jim. That's the crazier part.
Yeah.
This all started when, Pam Bondi gets into office and says, here I have a stack of Epstein files that we're going to go through. Then had a bunch of, conservative influencers walk out of the White House with these binders full of something. And then when, he goes sideways with Elon Musk, it all starts kind of falling apart. And then it continues to fall apart. The lie begets other lies. And then people just continue to feel that this is just a cover up. And why are you covering it up, right? You're dealing with women that were girls, I should say, that were sexually exploited, raped, by these rich, powerful men. And what the American public wants is justice for them, and justice to knowing that elites cannot get away with this.
No, you're absolutely right, and I mean that's been lost in a lot of this is the victims. I mean, the victims, they've sort of fallen by the wayside in this, what's been going on with Trump trying to cover everything up. The thing that I have a problem with, and I think it stinks to high heaven, is that his former defense attorney Todd Blanche is apparently involved with this meeting with Ghislaine Maxwell. I don't know how that's appropriate at all. And if they strike some kind of deal where she clams up or comes out and exonerates Trump or gives some story, I mean, this is not somebody who has a lot of credibility. And yeah, I mean, and then all of a sudden, Trump tries to act like it's case closed. What can you do at that point?
Well, look, I don't know. I mean, to be
Yeah.
honest, we're dealing in a whole new world. But I know what's not going to happen. The American public is not going to suddenly trust what happened there. The American public is certainly not going to trust the assistant attorney general or the attorney general. And look, administrations change, and I'm sure that Donald Trump is going to pardon himself and pardon everybody, going forward for whatever crimes they do while he's in charge. But at some point, you're going to have to answer questions, and you'll have to either deal with a real court or the court of public opinion. And Pam Bondi and a couple of these other people that are involved in Washington D.C. are going to have to live a long time recognizing that they covered up some really horrible people and really re-victimized, many, many little girls that were taken advantage of, and who knows who they're currently, covering up for that could also be victimizing currently other people.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, the actions that they're taking right now, which are pretty shameful, are going to follow them
Mhm.
for years from now. And I mean, this was the thing that the MAGA base was clamoring for years. People like Dan
Right.
Bongino and Cashville, the FBI director was clamoring for this. The attorney general. I mean, they were all talking about this during the campaign. And the other thing that strikes me as just bananas is the way Trump has been trying to throw out distraction after the distraction. And, now they've formed this task force to look into these allegations about Obama. And Trump says Obama is guilty of treason. And Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, comes out and I mean, the Wall Street Journal and Fox News don't even buy what Tulsi Gabbard has
Sure.
put out there. But I mean, your thoughts on that? Because I mean, there is something dangerous about all of this, is there not? When Trump goes
Well, I
out
mean,
there
there's
and
the
says
number one
Obama and
fact
treason.
is,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Tulsi Gabbard is absolutely going against her oath to office, and I'm not talking about oath to office as being the head of DNI, as an officer in the military. And at some point, again, she'll have to answer to that. She may again be part of this huge, pardons that this president's going to hand out to all of his cronies, but you don't get to get away from the UCMJ. And, I'm certainly going to be around long enough as a senator, longer than this president's going to be around. And I'm certainly going to be able to remind a lot of people that Tulsi is an officer in the United States Army, and she's not conducting herself as such. And she will be in the Army 4 years from now, and she will still be subject to the UCMJ. And if she conducts herself in a way that is unbecoming of that, I'm certainly going to be encouraging the military to be looking into her. Number two, the distractions aren't working because normally, if you throw a distraction, the MAGA people will take it. They understand the game. They're always kind of part of it, right? They're usually in on it. If you throw a distraction, they say, "Oh, that's a distraction. I'm here to aid. I'm going to amplify it and move on." The problem that is not working right now is because the distraction isn't to us Democrats, not to us independents, to people that are generally, either agnostic or hostile towards Trump. It's the fact that his own people don't believe it, don't and understand it, and think that this has been one big, sham that's been pulled over them for the last 8 years. And so that's, I think, what's very frustrating to Donald Trump, because normally he'll actually tell you, "I am doing this to distract you." And his MAGA followers be like, "Yes, you are. And we're going to play along." And it's not working. It's driving him nuts, because at the end of the day, you lied to these people for 8 years. And now they want to know, were you lying the whole time, or are you covering up for you and your elite friends?
Yeah, I mean, he's got it written all over his face that he's frustrated on a daily basis. And I mean, and he was just out there the other day basically lying to the American people. I mean, he was asked whether he was in the Epstein files, and he basically lied, and he tried to dodge the question, but I think at one point he does say no. And I just kind of wonder, are there going to be major consequences for this? I know he's been impeached twice, and he wasn't removed the second time around. But I mean, to me, this rises to the level of again where that question at least has to be pondered, considered. if he's implicated in a major way in this.
Well, look, it depends where, when, who, and who has the power to do it. At this
Yeah.
point, we know the DOJ and the federal government is 100% going to be, covering up for this man. If it's state, local prosecutors, maybe that's a different story. So we get information that matters. So we can't speculate. The most important thing we could do is make sure, and me as a Democrat, we want to make sure that we actually take power in 2 years. There's a reason why this man is so anxious to make sure the House of Representatives stays in the hands of Republicans. This is why he's asking all these states to redistribute themselves, because the last thing he wants is the House of Representatives that's appointing a special counsel and actually has subpoena power, right? Because that's when this all comes out. And that's when all the whole house of cards of all his shady little friends, his cabinet members that are helping him cover up this stuff also start falling down. So the way to actually have real check on this administration is to make sure that you have someone that can actually have the opportunity to, you know, subpoena, to get the records, get the people under witnesses. And if you've seen what this man has done, his motivation for running for office, again, was largely just to stay out of jail. And now we're seeing that he's willing to do anything, including, destroy, any semblance of the independence of the Department of Justice.
Yeah, and speaking of the midterms, I mean, I know it's a long way off, but I mean, the Gallup poll that just came out today shows Trump, I think, at 37%. This is the
Sure.
lowest he's been since before he left office. The first time around January 6th, I think he was at 34%. And, but Democrats have not been able to reap those rewards politically. It's, if you look at the polling, who knows? We don't know where we're going to be a year from now. What's your sense of that? Because you did mention the fact, and I do think that this is a possibility, that he is going to try to, by hook or by crook, figure out a way to not lose the balance of power up on Capitol Hill come next
Sure.
year. Yeah.
Well, look, when there have been elections, Democrats have overperformed and won a lot of special elections, right? So clearly there is something happening there. When you have polling that shows, what do you think about the individual party? It's a little harder. And because we're not running as a party right now. When we get closer to the elections, I think that like a national election, like you're going to see 2026, you'll see that. I think our first test for this is actually going to be the 2025 elections when it comes to New Jersey and Virginia. And I think you're going to see a very, very enthusiastic base of voters, Democrats, Republicans, and independents are going to come out and not support Donald Trump. So, and it's very easy to get on this bandwagon, especially Democrats will get on top of other Democrats, like, hey, we all suck, blah, blah, blah. Look, we're getting there. I do believe that, our messaging needs to be tighter and needs to be focused on bringing down the cost of living, bringing up the standards of living, making sure people know that they could actually have a real chance at the American dream like their parents did. And I think when we start talking that way and we actually have the opportunity for people to, explicitly, say that that's what they want at that ballot box, we're going to win. Right now, it's just that, the polling is based on who can you get on the phone, not who is actually going to show up that day.
Yeah, and I mean, and you've been talked about as somebody who might, have a future. You did say earlier you'll be a senator long after Trump is president, but you are heading to Iowa in August. I think I read that somewhere, and that's a long way from Arizona. Although I do think that the corn dogs
Places are always a long way from Arizona.
It's true. They do have some good corn dogs there. And by the way, a pretty darn good minor league baseball team in Des Moines. I caught a baseball game there one time when I was
the
stuck
guys
on a
running for
trip.
Senate from there.
There you go. I mean, so what are your thoughts heading out there? That's coming up next month. That's not too far off from now.
Yeah, I mean, like,
The Des
look,
Moines
my
Register
thoughts are
wrote
the
about
same
it.
thoughts of
Yeah.
what I did all over Arizona by going to the various parts of Arizona to talk about Medicaid cuts, or going to Pennsylvania, or going to other parts of the country, which we'll continue to do, to talk to places that have Republican representation and need to hear a voice, I would say of reason and at least at some level resistance, right? Especially to these cuts. Iowa is an entirely Republican delegation, both in the Senate and the House. You have Republicans Republican senators and members of Congress that voted against their own people. You're gonna have hundreds of thousands of Iowans are going to get kicked off Medicaid, food stamps, all to pay for the tax cuts for the very rich. A drop in the inheritance tax for the very wealthy and the lazy offspring of the wealthy. And because of that, you're going to have a lot of people hurting. Now, you know, where will I go and give a message? Absolutely. And I want, it's Iowa. I do like corn, so we'll enjoy that while we're there, and we'll get our message out as much as we can to help everyone up and down the ticket, whether it's 2026 or 2027 or 2028, no matter who the nominee is.
Yeah. Well, and one of the issues that everybody's going to be talking about, obviously, is immigration. Trump thought this was going to be a home run for him. Of course, he got downright fascist in the way he's conducted these ICE raids and put people in detention and so on. And I mean, I'm just looking at one report today out of the Texas Tribune. They're going to spend $1.26 billion to build the country's largest immigration detention center at Fort Bliss in El Paso. Just the other day, there was this story in the Guardian that mentioned these Florida detention centers where migrants, according to Human Rights Watch, were reported as eating like animals. Their hands were behind their back. They were eating off of plates like animals. What the hell is going on? I mean, in this country right now, it just seems like Trump and Stephen Miller have gone, full blown white nationalists in the way they're sweeping people up in this country. What's your sense of it? That's
Well,
my take. That doesn't have to be your take. But what's your take?
pain is what they want,
Yeah.
right? And they want to punish. And they can't actually really logically deal with fixing our broken immigration system, because that would require you making some real hard realizations. Number one, that this country actually can't function with a lot of these people's labor. Um, and two, you can't really deport all of them because it's just not physically possible, and you'll destroy the economy, right? So instead, what they want to do to their own base is show that they're just going to be dicks, to be honest. They're just going to be as biggest assholes as they can,
Good
even
way
though
of
they
putting it.
can't hit all the deportations. So that way they can keep going back to the base. Like, see, we're the tough guys, right? But like the history of America is not us. That's not us, right? If you look at, me being a Marine, one of the proudest things is that during World War II, when we were doing some really hard island hopping campaign, the Japanese civilians were absolutely shocked when they were treated with respect and dignity by U.S. Marines, because they were consistently told by the Imperial Army just in general propaganda that if you surrendered to Americans, you were going to get raped and
Mhm.
killed, and your family would too.
Right.
And so the fact that, we can't figure out how to have a sane deportation policy. We still need to deport people. There's
Sure.
there's no denying that.
That happens. Yeah.
But, any country that has to do that. But can we do it in a humane manner? Absolutely. We've been doing it way before this. Can we do it in a manner that targets criminals? If you actually do that, you would actually have illegal immigrants calling ICE and say, yes, I know where that gangbanger is. I know where that drug dealer is. I know where that person that beats his wife is. Here, come and pick them up, right? You wouldn't have mass protests on the streets, and you wouldn't have to have ICE agents covering their faces,
Right.
because people would actually understand that they're actually doing a just work and doing it in a just manner. But instead, what you have is people that are jumping away from due process. You're treating people inhumanely. You're sending people, deporting people to countries that they're not from,
Yeah.
right? And we're not safer in the process, right? We should be targeting these horrible criminals, these cartel elements that live in our neighborhoods. But instead, you're going after shop owners, you're going after, everyday workers, and you're seeing it. There are work sites that are,
Mhm.
absolutely empty. I grew up in a Latino neighborhood, grew up working in construction sites, grew up working in meat packing factories. And we should not be shocked to see that there's going to be repercussions from this, because the hardest jobs in the world are done by these communities. And
Yeah.
instead of, deporting them, we should just do some really smart, logical things. Make them pay a fine because you did break the law. You crossed the border without
Yep.
permission.
Sure.
Number two, go through a background check. You've been here. Let's make sure that you haven't done anything criminal, and that you have, a justification for staying here. Pay back anything that you owe the government, taxes, if you've been on some type of government program. And then you will get some type of permit to stay here. It won't be a green card, because there's a lot of people in front of you that are waiting for that green card. But we're going to make sure you can't get deported in the meantime, provided you keep your nose clean. And you could re-up your permit. That way, you're keeping families together. That way, you're actually getting rid of these awful people. That way, you're actually making these people productive members of society. Instead of this, very anti-American system they're using right now of roundups,
Mm.
pressure campaigns, fear. I mean, these are the things that are done by third world dictators, not by the greatest country in the United States. And it's really
Mm.
against our ethos, our values as a country, that we would ever do something like that.
Yeah. I mean,
And
I've
by
been
the way,
saying
that's why the American psyche is reacting to it
negatively. That's
negatively,
right.
because they don't know how to put their finger on it.
That's right.
but they know they don't like it because it
Yeah.
is ingrained in us. And I think is our in our DNA as Americans to believe in justice, believe in humanity, and the application of that law and the due process of it. And we may not be Harvard law professors or ACLU lawyers, but we do understand it and we do feel it, in our bones.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question about. I mean, I've said on this show many times. I mean, perhaps the biggest lie of the 2024 campaign was Trump saying we're going to go after the criminals and the gangbangers,
Yep.
and and people are responding to that. They're saying, "Wait a minute, I was told that's what you were going to do, and you're going after grandma. You're scooping up little kids with cancer. You're sending people to other countries. Just all kinds of crazy stuff." And I love the way that you describe it as dickish behavior, because it is dickish behavior. It is just the way it is. I mean, it is. It is what it is. The other thing I have to say that I find it interesting that you called this out is what's been going on in Gaza. And there's been headline after headline every day of just suffering on an immense scale in Gaza. And you tweeted, "When I served in war, I understood the dual obligation to combat terrorists and protect innocent civilians. Netanyahu's current approach to humanitarian aid in Gaza is failing and must be improved. The suffering of civilians cannot be ignored."
Yep.
And I mean, even it sounds like some of the reporting, even out of the White House, they're frustrated with Netanyahu. How do we get a handle on this?
Well, it's one thing when they switched because there was a program they were using. They're like, we're going to do this ourselves. They
Yeah.
failed, right? You are an occupying force. It is your responsibility to actually feed the civilians. And, when I was part of an occupation of Iraq, it was my job to protect my Marines and also to protect civilians. And that means if they get sick, you take care of them. You feed them. If they're hungry, you give them food. And Netanyahu has absolutely messed this up entirely. And this is not, if you talk to some people like, well, you're just taking information from the Gaza ministry
Right. Yeah. That's
of
what they
whatever,
said.
right?
Yeah.
No, I'm getting this from, the World Food Program, people that I trust, like Ambassador Cindy McCain, from Arizona. And they're telling me that they can deliver this food. They can do this in a humane way, in a safe way, in a way that the food doesn't get into the hands of terrorists, and that you're saving people's lives. And it doesn't have to be one or the other. You can be for Israeli security. You can be for Israel destroying Hamas, and you can be for Israel being able to be, a safe and sovereign country. But at the same time, much like I make the same demands of us as a United States government, you have to give compassion and humanitarian relief to civilians that are trapped and have no other way to go about. And what is the answer to this? Right now, like I don't know, but the right answer is that I can't just say that this is not happening, and that's why I've increasingly called more for Israel to do the right thing and feed the citizens of Gaza.
Yeah. Well, and you just have to wonder how long can this go on? Because I mean, it just seems like human suffering on a massive scale. And obviously, like you said, I mean, everybody wants Israel to have the right to defend itself,
Right. And
but
we want the hostages back too.
we
Like,
want the hostages back too.
I,
Yeah.
like I want this all done. I want to make sure that, the hostages
Yeah.
are back. I want Israel to be secure. I don't want, millions of Gaza refugees being, pushed out to other countries like Benjamin Netanyahu had plans to do that.
Yeah.
And I want them to be able to, live free of Hamas. There's no easy answer to this. But the basic easy answer right away is give supplies and food and shelter to those that need it, those civilians. Keep working to get the release of those hostages, and let's continue to try to move towards a long-lasting ceasefire. But at the beginning, the one thing that just cannot not do, the two things you cannot not do is give food and get those hostages released.
Yeah. Well, Senator Gallego, I probably went over on the time that your staff had in mind, but I do appreciate the time a lot today. Really appreciate it, and thanks for the straight talk. Have fun in Iowa out there.
I will, yeah. Come out. We'll eat some corn dogs or something like that if you want.
Sounds good.
Probably
Corn
too
dog
heavy,
with some
actually.
butter on it.
Yeah, it's a little too heavy for me, but yeah, it's fine.
I know. I'm trying to mind my girlish figure too, but all right. And congrats on the new kid.
Thank
Way to
you.
go. Thanks a lot, Senator. Appreciate it.
All right.
All right. Good to
Adios.
see you. Adios.
Bye-bye.
Senator Ruben Gallego of Arizona heading to Iowa next month. But that's going to be very interesting. He's heading out for the Iowa State Fair. That typically means at least somebody's thinking about their political future. I want to go very quickly to Stuart Stevens, who has been very nice to wait while the senator and I have been speaking. I've known Steuart for just quite a long time now, I should say. I don't want to date the two of us, but It's been some time now. He was a key advisor with the Romney campaign and has since become a really sharp critic of Donald Trump. He wrote what I consider to be just a classic book on politics. It was all a lie. Steuart is just one of the best thinkers in politics right now. So sending him the invite right now. Stu's going to chime in. There's Stu right there. Hey, Steuart, how are you? Good to
Hey,
see you.
Tim. Great to see you, man.
Hey, thanks a lot. Sorry, I was running a few minutes late. I was
No,
talking to
that's good,
Senator
man.
Gallego there.
I was watching and loving it.
Yeah, no, I was having a good conversation with him, and one of the things that he said, and wanted to hit through so many issues, I really didn't get to go back to it. He was talking about people think that the Democrats are kind of suck right now, and he too is trying to figure out ways to sharpen the message. I think he said at one point. And I guess what's your sense of things right now? I do want to talk about Trump and Epstein, but the other issue is that, today Gallup comes out with a poll that says Trump's at 37%. That's about as bad as it's been since, the January 6 days. And, you just have to wonder, are Democrats capable of capitalizing on that next year? What do you think at this point? How do they do
Well,
that?
Tim, what's happening now reminds me of when I was a Republican consultant while we won a bunch of races we had no business winning.
Yeah.
Um, I'm sort of baffled by this moment because here we have a president of the United States who's involved with Epstein, who's appointed these really just horrible people across the government.
Yeah.
I mean, terrible. And you have a Republican Congress that basically has abdicated any role. They're functioning as if they were in North Korea, and yet the discussion is what's wrong with the Democratic Party.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like, how how did we get here? That
Yeah.
like the party that they lost a race, okay, that happens. But the
Yeah.
person that was the nominee would have made a good president. She certainly is in the mainstream of American politics. It reminds me of the night when I was working for Romney and we lost. We went to bed, we were tired, we were disappointed, but we didn't fear for the country.
Right.
And that's the same way it would have been with Harris. You may not agree with her on this and that, but she's a serious person with serious intent. So they lost. Okay,
Yeah.
that happens. But I don't
Yeah.
understand why there's any fumbling around with Democrats of what is the message. They should
Yeah.
wake up every day and attack. And this idea in politics that there's one golden message, I think, is one of the great downfalls. I mean, how many campaigns I'd work in, somebody would always say, well, if only we had this spot or this, there is no perfect message. And
It's the messenger.
particularly, yeah, a lot of it comes down to who's the messenger. But,
Yeah.
particularly now when you have such a diverse media, of which you're a great example, we always tried to say, okay, we're going to have an education week. We're going to have a jobs week. I mean, you were on all those campaigns, you saw.
Oh, yeah.
And as you know, we never really pulled it off. But we could at least pretend. You can't have an education hour now or something, and people are getting information from all these different sources. So I reject the notion that the Democratic Party needs a message. What the Democratic Party needs is an attitude. It's like comics. Comics are not
Yeah.
their jokes, they're their attitude. And what their attitude should be is we're right, they're wrong. There's more of us than there are of them. Go out and seize it. This sort of hesitation, I read they're doing 250 focus groups about how to talk to young men. And you just
Yeah.
want to drive a nail in your head. Um,
No, it's so true.
you
You're
can't
absolutely right.
focus group your way out of this. You
That's
have to
right.
do it with passion.
Yeah.
And I've watched Bernie Sanders since I was at Middlebury, and he was running for mayor. I remember riding my bike down the main street in Middlebury, in Burlington. There was this lunatic yelling about rent control, and that was Bernie when he was running for mayor, and he won by 8 votes. And actually, he was a very good mayor. But
Wow.
I think a lot of people are drawn to them not for the ideology, but by their passion.
Yeah.
That
Well,
they,
and I tell people all the time when, they get down in the dumps about things, nobody thought there were very few people that thought Barack Obama was going to beat Hillary Clinton back in 2008. And I was out on the campaign trail with him and I watched him and I thought, I don't know. I think this guy could do something here.
yeah,
This is something different. This is something new. And I'm in a very different way, in a much more malignant way. I thought that about Donald Trump back in 2016. I just thought the way he has a hold on people, this is
yeah,
bananas and people better pay attention to this. And so I think some of this is driven by, if we see good candidates out there who just have the right stuff, some of this is going to take care of itself. But, I think we have to talk about Donald Trump and Epstein because you're talking about things that, just feel like bizarre world. I don't, how in the world do we have a president of the United States right now who is in the Epstein files?
How
It's
did we
nuts.
elect him? Everybody knew this about Donald Trump. There wasn't any surprise about it.
Yeah.
Um, and look, a lot of people were wrong about Trump in 2016, but it's really hard to find anybody who was more wrong than me, because I
Mhm.
couldn't let myself believe that this party that I had worked in, where we said this stuff,
Yeah.
character counts. That the office of the presidency is more than just a place that somebody goes to work. It represents the soul of the country. And, I felt like the guy who was working for Bernie Madoff and actually thought we were beating the market. So, like, all of this wasn't, that's why I wrote this book. It was all a lie.
Yeah.
Because I don't know any other
Great book.
way to come to any sort of rational, intellectually honest conclusion. People don't change deeply held beliefs in a few years unless there's some extraneous. I don't believe in UFOs. If one lands while we're talking, it'll change. But that didn't happen.
Yeah.
And it just proved that the party really didn't believe in anything but power. And, say what you will about Donald Trump, he does have this animal instinct for weakness. And I think he looked at the Republican Party and saw that we, and I was very much part of it then, really didn't care about anything but power. And that if he would come in and say, I will give you power, you're going to elect me, a guy, church in my life. It's where I go every, 10 years or so to marry a model. That, I think nuclear triad is some sort of like hot threesome. That a guy that has spent his life giving money to Democrats,
Yeah.
all of that. None of that'll matter to you if I give you power. And he was right.
It's such a stunning indictment. I mean, you're absolutely right. When I read your book, I just thought, Stu hit the nail on the head. But here's the thing. Donald Trump seems to me to be freaking out in a way that I've never really seen him freak out before, and I've been up close with him.
Yeah.
And the way he is just flipping his lid over this Epstein thing is remarkable. And in part, it's because he's run out of his dirty old man bag of tricks. It just ain't working anymore. And he's pulling these tricks out of his bag, and they're just not. And he's freaking out. The question, though, is, he's got his personal defense attorney, Todd Blanche, who's disguised as a Justice Department official, going down to Tallahassee,
Uh,
trying to, I guess, negotiate a pardon or something. You got to wonder, will the Republicans howl over that? They're starting to howl a little bit. And some of this, I don't know if it's standing on principle or it's just all the phone calls coming into their offices. Some of them are starting to go a little rogue.
yeah, look, I mean, it's sort of a test here. It's like when Roy Moore ran,
Yeah.
and you would say, okay, what would it take to get white Republicans in Alabama to vote for a reasonable Democrat? Say, what if the Republican was a child molester? They said, nope, 60+% of them still voted for Roy Moore.
That's true.
Um,
Yeah, he
but
rode that horse in and everything. And remember, he rode that horse in.
it's
Yeah.
just, what has always struck me as so bizarre about the right's obsession with the Epstein files is that the one person in our party, not my party anymore, but it was a party, that we know is really close to Epstein is Donald Trump.
Yes.
So, I mean, this wasn't a secret. There aren't any revelations. I mean, the Wall Street Journal or whoever it was, CNN, I guess today, released pictures of him at Hillary's and when he went to Donald Trump's wedding.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, this isn't a secret. These
Yeah.
guys were running buddies. There's all kinds of stuff about them, and yet the party didn't care. Um, so I think
It's kind of
right.
wild that we're just finding out about a lot of this stuff now. I mean, it took a Wall Street Journal story yesterday to find out he is in fact in the Epstein file. I mean, yeah, this has been going on for the better part of 20 years.
Yeah. And I mean, look, I if we were in front of a jury, what we would be looking to do is establish a pattern.
Yeah.
We can say, okay, is what this person is being accused of consistent with actions this person has taken before? And that's always some of the most compelling evidence. And with Donald Trump, a guy who talks in public about dating his own daughter, I mean, of
Unreal.
course it is. Of course
Yeah.
it's consistent with Donald Trump. The 27 some odd women that have accused him, a guy who a hometown jury found him liable of sexual assault that the judge called rape.
Yeah. The
Yes, this
escalator
is
thing where the girl's going up the escalator and he says, I'll be dating you in 10
I'll be
years.
dating you soon. It's the
Who says
creepiest
that?
stuff.
I asked that question of Mike Johnson. Who says that? That is just grotesque.
And, I mean, look, has it come to this, Mike Johnson? I mean, it
Let's
really,
talk
I
about him.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, just a nothing guy. And somehow, of course, they were basically on Craigslist looking for a speaker, and they ended up with Johnson. But
He is the weakest speaker I think
the
I've ever seen in
weakest,
my
yeah,
lifetime. Yeah.
and he's just a weak person.
Yeah.
And what really blows my mind here is all of these people, particularly in the Senate, who worked really hard, aspired all their lives to become senators. They're now in this powerful position. I look at Roger Wicker from Mississippi, somebody I've known, forever. We were pages in Washington together. A very good person, a guy who
Yeah.
most of his career has been spent, a lot of it focused on building alliances to make America stronger. He's now chairman of the Armed Services Committee, a dream of his life. And what is he doing? He's issuing impeached hexit. And he could not agree with Donald Trump more on Ukraine, and yet he won't call Donald Trump out by name.
Yeah.
And it's, I think it's a really interesting kind of moral dilemma that, like, the Norwegians found themselves in. Are you going to be in World War II? Are you going to be a Quisling? Probably, if you stayed in, maybe you made things a little bit better. Maybe they didn't arrest and torture quite so many people. Or do you fight it? And
Yeah. And
the
I mean,
party has just abandoned any sort of pretense that it's a normal American political party.
yeah, and one of my favorite books is Kennedy's Profiles in Courage, and
Yeah.
I just, it's a classic, and I just wonder, you've been up close with a lot of politicians. Is it just that a lot of these guys and I guess ladies too, they're just more concerned about winning the next election and staying in power because they get treated like a celebrity. They get, somebody holds their purse or their golf bag or whatever and drives them around, and they just like that life, and so they don't want to jeopardize it and put it on the line. And do something that's courageous. I don't understand it. There's
I
300
well,
million people in this country, and we got a bunch of people up there they just don't have any guts. I'll put Ruben Gallego to the side because I thought what he had to say earlier was kind of interesting, and he did sound like he was gutsy. But the vast majority of them don't sound very gutsy. How the hell did we
well,
get here?
I don't think we should redefine courage
Yeah,
as saying who won the 2020 election.
that's true.
That is what it's. I mean, look, these are heirs to the greatest generation. I mean,
Yeah,
people like my dad, he was an FBI agent, and he fought in South Pacific for 3 years, 28 island landings, came back. And he was just like hundreds of thousands of others, part of the greatest generation. And they handed that legacy to these generation of politicians. And yet they can't get their comm shop to put out a statement congratulating the winner of the 2020 election.
unreal.
That's a pretty low bar. And I don't think really it's about courage. I think it's about decency. And when you are quiet about something that is so detrimental and corrosive and toxic to the greatest democracy, to what it means to be an American, you are complicit.
Yeah,
They they are. I mean, you look at Marco Rubio and what we're doing to USAID. I mean, what's happening? If a year ago, if I had gone on CNN with you and said, "Look, dude, a year from now, there's gonna be mass men running around in a, department that will have a larger budget than any of the militaries in the world except for 2 countries."
unbelievable.
You would have said, I mean, probably you would have said, "Come on, give me a break." And yet
Yeah,
that's where we are.
no,
And
no, you're right. The ICE thing is unreal, and Marco Rubio being the son of Cuban immigrants, to me, I think you have a moral duty to
of course
speak
you do.
out when we're seeing unspeakable, inhumane treatment of migrants in this country. It's just absolutely 100% un-American treatment of migrants in this country. There's a story the other day in The Guardian about migrants having to eat like animals inside one detention
No.
facility in Florida. This is not who we are. But for some of these people, it is who they are. I guess
Yeah, and
It is
that's
who
what
Marco
Democrats
Rubio
need.
is.
That's what Democrats need to do. I mean, they need to go out and say, "If you vote for Pete Hegseth, you are not a patriot." 'Cause you're not. You can't
Yeah.
turn over the most powerful military in the history of the world to some boozy weekend guy at Fox
He's wearing these
and
skinny
call
ties from
yourself
the Gap and stuff. It's just a joke.
and say that you really care about America.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a timidity about the Democratic Party that drives me crazy, and I think they need to have more swagger, more confidence.
Yeah.
And be out there and asserting that what is happening here, it's wrong. If you had a list of ways to make the country poorer, less powerful, sicker, less of a force for good in the world, it's like Trump has gone through this laundry list of them. They're
Yeah.
doing it on every front.
Yeah. He's
And that's
almost
what
like a
they're
cyborg created in a lab that has exposed
exactly.
every inadequacy and inconsistency and hypocrisy that you could possibly imagine. It's
And
unreal.
this is what they're going to be remembered for.
Yeah.
You know, they've done all these things in their careers. They passed this law, they got this bill, they got this bridge, they got this airport. None of that is going to matter. This is like segregation. That's all you're going to be remembered for.
Yeah.
You know,
I agree.
which side of the bridge were you on? And this is the Trump party now.
Yeah.
And I mean, I am optimistic though about Democrats. I do think that Democrats can win. And I think if you asked me to say who is more likely to win the 28 and 32 election, I would say Democrats.
Yeah.
The base of
But the
Trump.
question is who? I mean, and that was where I was going to go next with this news, because I wonder if the Democrats need their own sort of disruptor, or, you know, maybe it's a personality type or something, you know, somebody who's just not a governor or a senator who's been waiting their turn patiently and so on. And just somebody who just goes for it and just starts blowing through some of these
Yeah.
early contests, and it just sort of throws the whole board game upside down. I mean, I just kind of wonder if it's going to be something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, you know, I'm a great believer in the theory that countries and parties invent leaders when they need them.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you look at Churchill, this kind of, alcoholic has been, who found a moment of historic greatness.
Yeah.
Margaret Thatcher, another sort of unlikable, harsh backbencher. And all of a sudden, the country and conservatives needed the Iron Lady. So what she had was powerful. Ronald Reagan, I mean, had to run 3 times. So, I mean, look, I knew Bill Clinton since he lost his race for Congress. I didn't look at Bill Clinton and say that's the next president. So I think you really never know about these people till they get out there,
That's true.
and they have to go out and to prove themselves. But
And I don't buy this stuff that Pete Buttigieg can't do it. I know people are, oh, because he's gay, he can't. I don't think that's true. People said that about Obama because he was black in 2008. You just don't know. We don't know what we don't know. When they get out there, you're right.
yeah, I mean, it's like a friend of mine who left unsaid, but is a well-known actor interested in politics, and he said, "Well, I always thought this girlfriend thing would be a problem, but I guess it's not. Maybe I should think about running." You know, I
Yeah.
I think that
The Churchill thing, though, is so beautiful. He's one of my heroes, and
yeah,
I talk about John McCain sometimes. He was one of my heroes, and I know he's a flawed person. And people say, "Oh, John McCain did this or that." He was one of my heroes. I just think I like that kind of a maverick style of politician. I've
sure,
always been sort of into that sort of thing. But the Churchill thing is so important. And if you look at what happened to Churchill, I mean, it was like every political force was out to get him, and
yes,
but it was that moment, and he rose to that moment. And I just kind of wonder, maybe we just don't know who that person is going to be.
he had moral clarity in
Yeah.
this moment. I mean, more than I think majority of people realize how close they came to coming to some appeasement with the Germans. And, that's really what the Republican Party has done. There used to be a thing that we said, don't negotiate with terrorists. And that's what the party's done.
Yes.
And they've appeased with Donald Trump. And, this idea you can't talk about 1930s Germany, I think is wrong. We're not going to end up the same way. We're not going to have another World War. We're not going to have another Holocaust. But what happened in 1930s Germany, you had these Prussian aristocrats who were very much like those leaders in the Republican Party, who, like Franz von Papen, they realized that they had lost touch with the working class, and the working class was becoming Bolshevik. So they said we had to stop this. The greater good is to ally with Hitler, and we'll be able to control him. And, when I was
Fool's
writing It
errand.
Was All a
Yeah.
Lie, I went back and I read Franz von Papen's memoirs. He was a Prussian aristocrat who really did more than anybody else to usher in Hitler. He wrote his memoirs in 1953, Jim, right? You could say things had gone a little sideways. World War II, 100 million
Yeah.
people dead. And he still was trying to justify it.
Yeah.
And
And there will be people like that.
and that's when people say to me about the Republican Party, where will the line be? Maybe it will be on Epstein. But if you think about it, this guy who they now do everything he says inspired a mob that came into their workplace and tried to kill him. And once you accept that, you think there's going to be some like policy? Well, he's issuing the law of the sea treaties too much. I'm not going to
Yeah.
do
Well,
it.
and they're busy rewriting that, the history of that day. They're trying to rewrite the history of the 2016 campaign and whether Russia interfered in the election. And the thing that worries me the most, Stu, right now is we have a polarized society that
Yeah.
has a media landscape that is completely broken. And I've talked about this on my show a number of times. I mean, our news and information system in this country is completely broken. You have corporate media companies that are kowtowing and bending the knee to Trump. You have a right-wing juggernaut with Fox and all of the influencers on the right. And we have this, this Battlestar Galactica thing that's starting up on Substack and an independent media. And that's all well and good, but public broadcasting is getting kneecapped. And people still live in these silos. And you and I
Well,
can have this conversation, and people can chime in and say, that's attaboy Stu and attaboy Jim. But there are huge parts of this country where the information is not getting through and the truth is not getting through. And it makes me worry that people will excuse Donald Trump being in the Epstein files because they'll cook up some bullshit excuse on Fox, or they'll cook up some Laura Loomer will cook up some bullshit on X. And that's what terrifies me, is that you and I aren't even in the 2012 world that you and I operated in 13
oh
years ago.
God, I mean, 2012 was like the Crimean Wars.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
it's
call
like,
it the golden age. I tell my
I mean,
friends all the time, like, I got to ride on the campaign plane with Mitt Romney, and he was actually nice to us. He was a very good and decent man.
yeah,
That
and
shit's out the window.
I mean, he had great respect for the office. He had great respect for President Obama.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that was even true. I worked for Bush in 2000.
Yeah.
And that horrible recount period. Um, I know because I was around Bush. If Gore had won, he would have been, done what he could to support him. And just as a side note, I don't think we talk enough about what an American hero was. Al Gore was the night that Supreme Court decision came
Yes.
down. Because if ever there was a moment you could tear the country apart, it was then. And as I understand it I've gotten to know some of his aides, that when that came down, one of the first things he told his staff was, don't trash the Supreme Court.
Hmm.
That it is more important than this moment, which is a tremendous act of patriotism and sacrifice. Look, I go back to, the core of MAGA and of the Republican Party now is non-college educated white voters.
Yeah.
That's the fastest declining demographic in America. In 2000, in the Bush campaign, it was 60%. Now it's 39%. So I think the coalition that Trump put together that enabled him to win, I always thought this was unsustainable because either MAGA was going to demand that you have mass men chasing gardeners through Brentwood, or if they did that, descending on these people who, are just leeching off the system, which is why we always go to their workplace to find them, that it was going to shatter you were able to get up to 43% of Hispanic vote, which is what we got in Bush, by the way, in 2004, and then it dropped to 31% for McCain and Romney.
Yeah.
So I think that coalition is shattering. Just Democrats need to go out and have that moral clarity and not be afraid to say, you are wrong.
Yeah.
This is evil. And don't shy away
And
from it.
standing with somebody who is evil makes you evil, makes you
It's
complicit.
complicit. It's absolutely. Yeah. I mean, every one of those Republican office holders who did not speak up when Donald Trump pardoned cop beaters, they are people who support pardoning cop beaters. It's that simple. It's these aren't. I mean, you think about it, I talk about this with Joe Trippi, who now, was great Democratic consultant. I always thought he was the best of his generation. And we laugh about what we used to fight about. It was like, was the capital gains tax going to be 28% or 34%? I mean, it's quaint,
Yeah.
And,
If only we could go back to those days. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we need a center-right party in America.
Yeah.
But we don't have one now. We have an extremist movement. And the history of extremist movements is they only become more extreme and the purity tests become more and more demeaning and demanding.
Yeah.
And,
Well, and
you know,
it's the
I
reason
think
why. Yeah, go ahead.
I think like the reason Trump appoints somebody like Pete Hegseth, he knows Pete Hegseth's an idiot, but he wants to prove that he can make these Republican senators debase themselves,
Yeah.
that they will get down on their knees and vote for somebody to be defense secretary who's an idiot. And I can do it. This is power. And
It's his way of showing control over
exactly.
other men.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no question. Yeah, no, and I think you hit on something that I think is at the heart of this, and it's about having guts. It's about having courage, and it's an intangible, and it sounds a little quaint and it sounds a little hokey, but that's kind of what it's all about here. And we ain't
Listen,
seen a whole lot of it.
losing, there's no shame in losing a race.
Yeah.
And I really don't know. I go back to Roger Wicker. His next primary is in 6 years, and he's gonna be nearly 80. So, I mean,
Yeah.
give me a break. This isn't about being worried about losing a primary. And so what if you lost a primary? One of the things that just baffles me, Jim, is you've been around a lot of politicians, and they tend to have big egos, which is fine. Nothing wrong. So do writers. So do great
Yeah.
athletes. So do great
Yeah.
musicians.
So do
We haven't
journalists.
sh-
Yeah.
so sure, we haven't shot anybody all day for that. But you would think that that part of them that has that ego would understand how they are viewed and will be viewed. And we're not
Yeah.
talking 50 years from now. What their children are going to study about January 6th is not going to be that these people should have been pardoned. And what they're going to study, they're going to ask, when there were masked men disappearing American citizens, what did you do? And that's not going to go away. And
That's
I
right.
just don't understand why they say, well, I'm the person who stood up. I lost, but I stood up. And why don't you want to be that person? It's really fascinating to me, and
Such a good
incredibly
point.
disappointing.
It's at the heart of where we are right now, honestly. I mean,
Yeah,
I couldn't agree with you more.
but
And
I just gotta say, there was something about what we did in the Republican Party, Jim, that valued winning over anything else. And I was guilty of that. All I cared about was winning. I didn't worry about anything else. Um, and that enabled a group of very superficial, weak people to rise to success because they just had to go along and be there and say the right things. And all of these things that we said, like character counts, deficit, any of this stuff, they were just marketing slogans
yeah.
and they weren't beliefs. And I think, look, somebody has spent 25 years plus pointing out flaws in the Democratic Party. But think about it. If John Kerry, on the night of the election in 2024, had said that he won and George Bush lost, the Democratic Party
Right.
would have told him he was insane.
Exactly.
And the New York Times would have said, like, this man has lost his mind.
Yeah.
And there's not an equivalency there. There is something about the Republican Party, a sickness that we enabled. And, I was part of that. And I think we have to be honest about it. How did we allow this to happen?
Well, I think confession is part of the cure, Stu. I think that goes a long way, and I know you've been, a solid guy and being upfront about all this, and you've written about it extensively, and I hope people take it to heart. And I hope every once in a while that somebody from MAGA world says, I just want to see what that Jim Acosta is saying over there, and he's got Stu on, and
Yeah.
God damn it, what are those guys saying? And maybe they'll listen to some of this
But dude, you are a
and they'll
truth
take it to
teller
heart.
you are a truth teller all the way.
Well, I appreciate
Um,
it.
no, I mean, it's absolutely true.
Yeah.
And
Well, my attitude is that, and I think it's the same as yours, which is the stakes are too high. I don't want to see this country going down the tubes. You talked about World War II. My mom's dad, he died when she was just 2 years old. I never got to know him, but he's buried at Arlington National Cemetery. My dad is a Cuban refugee, came over in
right.
'62, right before the Cuban Missile Crisis. That's what makes this country a special place. I'm not putting myself on a pedestal or saying, "Oh, look at my biography." I'm just saying, like, I feel like that's a pretty goddamn special
No,
thing.
it's what
And
is
I don't want that to go down the
extraordinary,
tubes.
Jim, what is extraordinary is the ordinariness of your story.
Exactly. That's
That
it.
is what makes America great. And, I think about Ronald Reagan. He announced in front of the Statue of Liberty to send the signal that he signed a bill that made everyone in the country legal before 1984. And his last speech was an ode to immigrants.
That's right.
And we should not kid ourselves that what is happening with ICE in the Republican Party is a saying that we're just against illegal immigrants. And Trump has pretty much ripped the Band-Aid off of that. He says, we're going to deport bad people. It doesn't matter if they're Americans or not.
Well, he wants his cruelty to become everybody else's cruelty. And that's the scary thing about what we're in the middle of. And that's what makes this fight so important, in my view, and why we have to tell the truth.
Yeah. And listen, it's another whole conversation, but I don't think we talk enough about race in this. And, if you take a list of the very competent, African Americans that Trump has taken out of powerful positions and put incompetent or, not more competent white people.
Unreal.
And, in 85 and 20, Trump's coalition was 85% white. Okay, he did a little better in 24. It was 84% white. But at the heart of all of this rage is the fact that America's becoming a minority-majority country. And
that's okay.
And all the Stephen Millers in the world are not going to change that.
They're not going to change it.
And when you really, in a very simple sense, you look at everything that Trump is doing, and it's hard to credit him with any organized thought, but there are people around him that have very organized thoughts. And when your base of support are lower educated white people, what do? You try to get more white people. You curate the electorate, which is what they're trying to do with ICE and all this stuff that they're doing with voting laws. And you try to make people less educated. You attack education.
It's kind of their own great replacement theory when you think about it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this idea that higher education has become like an on-ramp to socialism. I think about that every time I go to the Ole Miss Alabama game. Like, really? We're socialists now because, we're going to college?
It's unreal.
And it's in many ways very transparent and very simple. In the same way that the Russians wanted to elect Donald Trump and they elected him, and what did they get? They got a lot. More than they ever could have imagined.
That's exactly right. And it could not have gone better for them. I mean, talk about a low cost, low budget way to infiltrate American politics.
The greatest covert op in the history of the world, undoubtedly.
No question.
And I mean, if you just think about it, the core of the anti-Soviet Union, anti-communist, and questionable, doubting Russia, doubting Putin, was the most conservative element of the Republican Party.
Totally.
And that now has become the beating heart of the pro-Putin element of American politics.
Yeah.
And that is, to go back to Churchill, it's like Churchill decided that Nazis are good. And, they surrounded, it's just extraordinary.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, Stu, I mean, I think we're going to have to do this on a regular basis because we didn't even get to some of the stuff that I wanted to talk about, which is, how do we get through to young men and hit them upside the side of the head and say, stop worshiping this guy who was just mocked on South Park for certain things that, maybe I shouldn't say, but maybe I will say as I close out the show. But, I mean, honestly, the stakes are really high right now. It's a tall order that we're up against, but I'm glad that you're on the case, Stu. I've always been glad that you're on the case because you're a truth teller, and I really appreciate the time. Let's do this again.
I'd love to.
Let's make it a habit. All right. Good to see you, man.
Talk to you.
All right, you too. Take care. All right, that's the great Stuart Stevens. And, we didn't get to reminisce about the 2012 campaign. We would see each other out on the campaign trail. And I always just thought Stu was a character, but also kind of a sage with lots of wisdom to impart upon young reporters and journalists like myself. Anyway, really interesting guy, and hope we can keep these conversations going. And I noticed the Lincoln Square folks were chiming in. Stu's with Lincoln Square. I don't even know if I mentioned that as we were getting going. But obviously, when you're on the Substack machine and you want to give them a subscribe, I would say go ahead and give them a subscribe because you get to hear from the wit and wisdom of Stuart Stevens, who always a treat to talk to. Really appreciate his time. A couple of things to close out on, I have to say, and I know Hulk Hogan endorsed Donald Trump in 2024. I'm going to say anyway, Hulk Hogan, rest in peace. I grew up watching the World Wrestling Federation. I guess they changed it to WWE at some point when I stopped caring about professional wrestling, but I grew up watching Hulk Hogan, and I will say that I did love it. When he would say, you know, um, what you going to do when the Hulkster runs wild on you? I mean, I will just say that when he was battling Andre the Giant and Big John Studd and the Junkyard Dog and all that stuff, there might be just a very small segment of the people who are watching right now who understand anything that I'm saying right now. But it was a big part of my childhood. And I have to say, and I know people say there's all these problems with Hulk Hogan, and it's all true. Yes, there are all these problems with Hulk Hogan. But I am going to say, like I said earlier on social media earlier this week about Ozzy Osbourne, who was also, crazy train. And anyway, rest in peace to Hulk Hogan. Rest in peace to Ozzy Osbourne. I have to say, just to close out this show, that the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States is a beautiful thing. And the reason why I'm going to say that right now is because the people at South Park are just a national treasure. The Wrap reporting that South Park creators Trey Parker and Matt Stone may have signed an extremely lucrative new streaming deal with Paramount, but on Wednesday, yesterday, they proved that deal won't keep them from criticizing the company or President Donald Trump's nether regions, let's just say. The new episode, called Sermon on the Mount, roasted the way various media companies and institutions have caved instead of fighting Trump's various lawsuits or institutional abuses. And this is in the Wrap. And if you haven't seen the video, you can go look at it on social media. The video depicts Donald Trump literally in bed with Satan and featuring a sermon from the show's version of Jesus Christ, urging everyone not to provoke Trump and begging them to be afraid of him. The episode ended with the town of South Park agreeing to settle a clearly nuisance lawsuit filed against it by Trump for $3 million. Anyway, it's absolutely hysterical. It's hilarious. Please go watch it. But, one of the reasons why we're obviously seeing the folks over at South Park, which falls under Paramount, putting out this kind of video is because of what happened to Stephen Colbert over at CBS, who became a victim of what's happening over at Paramount these days. But I will say it is a beautiful thing about the First Amendment in this country when you have South Park taking it to the commander-in-chief and just exercising their First Amendment rights, the artistic expression. You have a right to expression in this country, and they certainly express themselves. If you get a chance to take a look at it, I can't top it with any kind of closing monologue on the show other than to say, please go take a look, because, wow, they really do go after the guy who is hiding from the Epstein files in the White House right now. My thanks to Senator Ruben Gallego. My thanks to Stuart Stevens of Lincoln Square. If you've not read his book, It Was All a Lie, it's an absolute classic, and it's not a very long book. You can read it pretty quickly, but I think it's a classic piece of political literature, and I encourage everybody to take a look at it. Hey, everybody, thanks for watching. Really appreciate it. I think I'll be doing kind of a mini show tomorrow. I'll keep you posted on that. But in the meantime, it's been a great week this week. We've had just some incredible guests and a lot of breaking news. My goodness. Yesterday, I think I did 4 different podcasts, including my own, including talking to Katie Couric and Don Lemon about that explosive story out of the Wall Street Journal in the Epstein files, Donald Trump in the Epstein files. We're going to continue to follow Epstein Gate on this show without commercial interruption here on Substack and on Apple Podcasts. Perhaps you have a little bit of that on YouTube, but I always appreciate everybody watching and giving some of your valuable time to watch this program. It is greatly appreciated day in and day out. Still reporting from Washington, I'm Jim Acosta. Have a good evening, everybody. I'll see you next time.